Welcome to BreakSec 2484. I'm Alex Tadashev, your tour guide today. We're going to talk about Snort. We're going to talk about as much as we can about Snort in 45 minutes, right? Which we know the challenges there. Snort 3 is the Cisco secure firewall. So if you're meant to be somewhere else, you're in the wrong place. So if you came for Snort, you're in the right place. Call this brave new pig. I'm a TME with Cisco. I was a SourceFire customer back before most of you were born. Well, quite that long ago. But I was a SourceFire customer, SourceFire instructor for 5 years, professional services, and then I came to the dark side, which is the business unit. So, you know about WebEx. You've probably seen this slide a few times already, so we're not going to spend much time there. So this is our agenda today. We're going to talk a little about Snort 2, just to get us all on the same page, so we have a reference. We'll talk about an overview of Snort 3. And this is unfortunately going to be pretty high level on these things, but I'm going to dive in where I can and give you some details. And because of my background, my take on this, my angle, if you will, is always a practical application. Right? So how are we going to practically apply this? It's less about exactly the mechanics of how it works and more about how you might want to use it. Let me make sure we cover everything there in the intro. We'll talk about one of the coolest features, I think, in the Snort 3 intrusion policy, and that's rule groups. It sounds boring, but it's not. We'll talk about recommendations, something you may be familiar with. That is in Snort 3 is now, it was in Snort 2 policy, it's Snort 3 as well now. It's changed a little bit. I think it's a little bit easier to understand. And we'll take, again, a quick look at the Snort rules language, look at some changes there. Probably seen this slide already. You know things have been renamed. So now I want to mention too about this deck. There's some hidden slides in it, so make sure and get the PDF from your app, or I'll try to throw it into the WebEx room as well. My flight's like 2 hours after the end of this, so maybe when I'm at the airport, I'll throw it in there, and I'll be able to answer any of your questions too, as much as I can, until I get on the plane. But the room will be open for a few days afterwards, so feel free to ask questions. Okay, everybody ready? Okay, let me tell you one thing though. Talos doesn't have Snorties, but I do. So this is participation might get you a pig. Okay, and just to kick things off, we'll just throw one over there just in case. Okay, I have these silly footballs that TAC is giving away too. I don't know what good those are. Okay. All right, Snort 2. So this is kind of the basics of Snort 2. This is where, way back in 1999, when Marty Resch started writing it, this is kind of what he came up with. So we've got the sniffer, which pulls the packets off the wire, called the DAC or DAQ as well. And this decoder is pretty much what you get with TCP dump, right? So Snort's background is as a packet sniffer. Then we have the preprocessors. So preprocessors are really the secret sauce with Snort. Right, these are the things that really give Snort the power in the rules language by normalizing, by doing things like defragmenting at the IP and TCP layer. And the idea behind the preprocessor, the big deal is it prepares the packet data so the rules will work. Right? So as a rule writer, you don't have to figure out 47 ways that a packet could be encoded. It's already been decoded for you with the preprocessors. Then we have the detection engine, which is where the rules are. Again, kind of the core of Snort, where the rules engine is. And then output, right? So after you get an alert, you hit something, you're going to want to send an alert somewhere. All right, so again, a little bit more on preprocessors. They present that packet data to the detection engine, so they're very key in the way things work. By the way, if you break these, you'll break the rules too. But that's another story. So that's part of the network analysis policy, really, in Snort 2 and in Snort 3 as well. Fragmentation, reassembly state, things like that. Okay, great. This is Snort today, right? So over the years, we've added some things on, a lot of capabilities. I broke out some of the preprocessors there. You can see Frag 3, which is the IP defragmentation preprocessor. String 5 is the TCP preprocessor, but we do app ID now. We can carve files out of flows. I changed the way the rules engine looks here too. It's not just a big list of rules. So there are rule trees that are generated when Snort starts. So we do intelligent matching of the packets. So if you have a 10,000 rule set, you don't have to run a packet through 10,000 rules. We're going to already have pre-qualified which rules that packet's going to go through to make it much more efficient. Okay, so now we're up to speed on Snort 2, right? Okay, let's talk about Snort 3. So Snort 3, one of the main goals, these are the main goals that we're looking for when they started work on Snort 3. And Snort 3, as you may know, has been in the works for a long time. So it finally came out a couple years ago, but it's been a long time working on getting to Snort 3. So we wanted a modern architecture. And the idea is for better handling of the Snort 2 evasions. And that really comes from the fact that Snort 2 is a packet-based engine. So it's a packet sniffer, right? So it starts out packet, 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 but then we built in kind of provisional statefulness, application-aware processing, so it knows where the application boundaries are, like in an HTTP request, so it treats the whole thing as one thing. But it's not designed from the ground up like that. So the idea with Snort 3 is it's a flow-based detection engine. So it's designed from the ground up to look at the flow instead of the packet. HTTP 2 is another one wanted in there. Better Internet of Things, IoT, SCADA, whatever you want to call it. Better detection there. Some intelligent traffic normalization, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Also wanted some performance gains. You saw the blocks that are in Snort 2 now, right? Figured after the years of kind of sticking things together there's some efficiencies we can gain from that, and we did. It's definitely faster. Regex acceleration via some of the Hyperscan library in the Intel processor, and more efficient memory utilization. Big thing in Snort 3 too. And again, this doesn't mean much to you day to day, but when it comes to the ability to be agile in 0-day additions to Snort 3, right? If you're going to change it and add some type of new detection, everything's a module with Snort 3. So it's much easier on the Talus end, on the open source end, to modify this thing. Okay. Okay, so again, back up to Snort 3 2 for a second. Let's talk about how we make things faster with Snort 2, right? So how do you, if you have a box that can process a certain amount of traffic, how do you increase that? Well, you put more CPUs in it and you run Snort more times, right? So it's basically you run Snort as many times as you can on that box, as many CPUs as you have, and that increases your performance. So we have a connection hashing algorithm that comes in. When a connection comes in, it's hashed on the 5-tuple in the connection, right? So that every other packet in that connection is going to hit the same CPU. So the hash is going to go to a certain CPU. It's going to sit there. So, but the advantage of this type of architecture is you have linear scalability, right? So if you have a 500 megabit box with one CPU, you add another CPU, and you get a gig, right? Add another CPU, you get another 500. So you get another, it's scalable, you get another linear addition every time. There's really no loss there in overhead. But the problem is you're duplicating the memory structures, right? So with every Snort, it's a single-threaded process. Everything is in there. The rule tree, the network map, all the preprocessor configs, everything's in that same memory. You load it again, you load all that stuff again, and again, and again, and again. So, on a 2 CPU system, it's not that bad. On a 30 or 40 CPU system, you're loading Snort 30 or 40 times. So you could recover a lot of memory there if you didn't have to do that. So, and if you want to see this yourself, if you have a firepower or a threat defense now, we call it, device, you can go to your command line, and this is in the expert mode, just on a regular FTD device, and go to expert mode, run process show -df grep snort. You can see there's 3 Snort processes there. So this one happens to be a 3 CPU little box, right? The big ones can be much more than that, right? 30, 40 CPUs. So we ran Snort 3 times, so pretty obvious. Okay, how does that work in Snort 3, you ask? Anybody want to know how it works in Snort 3? Anybody want to know how it works? Oh gosh, okay, that's a long ways. I don't know if I can throw that far. Hold on. Oh yeah, okay. This is how it works in Snort 3. It's threaded, uses multiple cores, right? It's not a single threaded process anymore. However, we still have a load balancing algorithm, so don't be confused and think that we can somehow take a flow and still spread it across CPUs to process one flow. We still can't do that. We're working on it. There's some thoughts on how to do that. But it turns out that the inter-process communication between CPUs, it's just not fast enough to maintain the state. And it's not just our problem, it's an architecture problem with the way CPUs work. So we still load balance the flow when it comes in. But now there's one control thread and multiple packet processing threads. So what do we get out of that? Well, we regain all that memory, right? So things like the network map, the rule trees, they only have to be loaded once. And then the packet threads do the processing. So we can reload faster, and we can load more rules now if we want with the same memory, because we're using less memory to start with. And this is the same box, so the same FTD device that we saw earlier. I just loaded Snort 3 on it, so upgraded to 7.0, I think, and loaded Snort 3. PS-EF grep Snort, there's only one Snort now. But you'll notice there's the Snort binary. On the command line, there's a Z3. So Z3 is telling it, hey, use 3 packet processing threads, and that could also be -- max packet threads, but that's what it looks like under the hood. We're just telling it, load, use X number of packet processing threads. So this is similar to the slide we saw on preprocessors for Snort 3. They're called inspectors. So when you're talking down in your syntax and vocabulary, when you're talking about Snort in Snort 3, where you used to say preprocessor in Snort 2, now you say inspector. Really the same thing, but, and just as a side too, in Snort 3, some of the inspectors were ported, some of them were brand new. HTTP is one of those, it's brand new. So HTTP is a brand new inspector in Snort 3, but anything that was a preprocessor in Snort 2 is now called an inspector. Everything in Snort 3 is a plugin. Again, not that matters that much from a practical standpoint, but the idea is everything's a plugin. Every rule keyword is a plugin. So if we wanted to add a new rule keyword, it's just a plugin. So everything is easy. That's the maintainable. And this is my real quick pig versus pig, I'm calling it. Again, get that PDF with the presentation. You can read over this at your leisure. But this talks about the back and forth comparison between Snort 2 and Snort 3. One thing I want to make sure I get is using an acronym over there. It may not be apparent. That's a PDU is a protocol data unit. That's what a PDU is. So I noticed that was on there and really explained what that is. But it's a Lua configuration. And, you can read for yourself there. But it's basically a different architecture. Okay. So what I want to do now is just talk a little bit about the intrusion policy in basically release 7 of the Firewall. And again, I'm going to just show some of the highlights, just kind of what it looks like, but I want to dive into those rule groups. So this is what the policy UI looks like. You know, if you've upgraded 7 at all, or even late 6s, you probably have a UI that looks kind of like this. This is the light UI, we call it. But this is the intrusion policy page. So this is policies, intrusion policy. You notice that here we have tabs now for the network analysis policy. Remember before, network analysis policy was, stuck up there, kind of in a hidden little link. We didn't want you to get to it. Still don't want you to get to it. Okay, so just leave it alone. But you can get to it on a tab right there now. There's your policy, so it looks kind of similar. We have the policy name, description, there's your base policy. Now, in this case, there's 3 policies here. Right? I have one called balanced, I called one IDS passive SLC, and one I called secure IPS. So there's 3 policies, but there are really 2 versions of each policy. So there's a Snort 2 and a Snort 3 version, and they're actually separate policies. So you could actually say there's 6 policies here. So what happens is when you're upgrading, once you go from a 6X to 7X, what the FMC is going to do, and FMC is the Firepower Management Center, it's now called the Firewall Management Center. Now the good news about that is you can still say FMC, so that's nice. But so when you upgrade from 6X to 7, what it does is it's going to take your Snort 2 policies, however many you have, and it's going to create Snort 3 versions of those. Now those are going to be, I don't know what percentage, upper 90% the same as far as the rules. Those rules are going to be, the Snort 3 rule set, most of those are converted rules from Snort 2, using the Snort 2 Lua utility, which is an open source utility you could use too. But there are some extra rules in there that are specific to Snort. And just as a tip, if you look at any rule that's at a 300,000 range in Snort 3, those are native Snort 3 rules. So if you're looking to write native Snort 3 rules, those are the ones you should look at. Don't look at the converted rules from Snort 2. That was just done with Snort to Lua. But if you want to know how Talos writes Snort 3 rules, look at those 300,000 SID range rules. And another some other free advice. If you want to write rules, understand how to write rules, look at the Talos rules, understand why they did things in the rule, that they wrote, and then write your rules that way. Because it's easy to write a bad rule, honestly. It's not so easy to write a good rule. Best way to do that is look at the Talos rules. Okay, sorry, a little tidbit there. Okay, as far as the mechanics here of editing, again, 2 versions. There's a little pencil over there that will edit the commonalities between the 2 policies, right? So there's some things that are common. Click on the pencil on one of the policies, you get this box, so you change things like the policy name, description. Those are common between the Snort 2 and the Snort 3 version. The inspection mode is common. Now, it's common to start with. You can actually go into a policy, like a Snort 3 policy or 2, and actually change the detection mode and make it different than the other, its counterpart. I don't recommend that, but you can. The base policy is also something that's always going to be the same between the 2 versions of the policy, Snort 2 and Snort 3. All right, so that, again, real quick on the mechanics of what they look like, what policies are, what happens when you upgrade your FMC. Let's talk about rule group security levels. Now, I had to pick one feature that I really liked about Snort 3. Again, it was based on the time, and I honestly think it seems a little bit mundane. Honestly, it's just a UI feature, really, the way rules are organized. But in my experience, going out to customers, I think this is one of the most useful features going forward that can help people maintain their intrusion policies well, okay? So rule groups. So these are actually the categories that I break down into the groups, but those are the categories, things like browser, server, policy, et cetera. So when you click on one of those groups, and this is in the UI, I didn't bother doing a demo, it's pretty straightforward. Once you see it in the UI, it works just like this. So when you click on one of the groups, it'll expand into the categories. Sorry, one of the categories, it'll expand into the groups. So these are the rule groups. So in the browser group, you can see we have WebKit, plugins, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, that's great. Wow, very impressive, Alex, big deal. We had classifications in Snort 2 rules, it's not that big of a deal. Why is it a big deal? Well, it's the security levels here. That's the key to the rule groups in Snort 3. So if you notice, each one of those rule groups has a security level next to it. So what you can do is you can modify that. Now, we'll talk ad infinitum today about security levels, so you make sure you know what those are. But the point is, they can be set on a per group basis, and they equate to Talos policies. Now, the difference between Snort 2 and Snort 3 is Snort 2 only gives you this option at the policy level. At the policy level, you can pick, the connectivity policy, right, is based. Balanced policy. What's the next one after balanced? I heard noises and there you go. I'll take those bags off. Yeah, security. So it's connectivity, connectivity over security, balanced security and connectivity, security over connectivity, and the dreaded max detect, right? So there's 4 security levels. So the security levels map directly to policies. Now, Talos would want me to make sure and let you know that that's how it is today, but don't get married to that, right? You really should start thinking in Snort 3 about the security level and think less about the policy, because we're going to do some stuff coming up in 7.3 and 7.4 with MITRE and things like that are kind of muddy this whole base policy thing. But if you remember the security levels, then you're good. But right now they're one-to-one. Security levels match right over to policies. Okay, so how do you do that? So in the groups, let's say I select one of those groups. This is the Internet Explorer group from the previous slide. So if you click that, on the right, what'll happen is you'll see all the rules that are in the Internet Explorer group. Okay, great. If you click the little edit up there, though, then you get to modify that security permission or security level for that group. So clicking on that will pop up this edit security level dialog. So here you can just pick one of those little chicklets there, and it'll explain to you as you do it what you're going to get. Right, so first one's going to be, of course, like connectivity policy, the least aggressive enforcement. Click again, you're going to get the, not click again, but click on that spot. You'll get the balanced policy, or the security level 2. Security level 3, an aggressive approach, and the most aggressive approach. And again, I have to say, every time I mention max detect, I have to mention, don't use max detect, okay? If you use max detect in your production network, I can virtually guarantee you're going to impact the network or the device or both. So we're talking, 37,000 rules or something like that in max detect today, 30,000, something like that. So your mileage may vary, but it's not really recommended for production. If you want to test it, that's great. So if let's say in this case, I decide to settle on number 3, the security of a connectivity policy, save that. What'll happen now is you customize the security level. So again, it seems mundane. Why is that so cool? So here's why that's cool. You could do the same thing in Snort 2, right? You could do the same thing in Snort 2. What you have to do is you'd have to go into the rule group. If you even had one, you probably do. You can find the rules for Internet Explorer. You'd have to go in there and manually go to every rule, decide whether it should be turned on or off. So if you want to increase your security level like I did here, I went from like 2 to 3 or 1 to 3. You'd have to go in, look at every rule, maybe read the rule and go, okay, that one's on, no, that one's off, that one's on. So you come up to kind of the same thing. But what happens in, what day is today? Thursday, right? What happens Thursday when they release a new rule set? Well, they might have some more Internet Explorer rules. You got to go do that again. Next Tuesday, you got to go do that again. So it's not a good way to maintain that. With this, once you do that, once you set that security level, it's going to grab that security level from the Talos policies from that point forward. So you don't have to do anything else. So as you probably know, every rule release, there's going to be certain rules enabled based on the base policy you selected, more for higher, right? And after a couple times a year, Talos is also going to take those rule sets and prune them, kind of reduce the rule count, because you don't want the rule sets to grow indefinitely, right? So what I've seen in my experience with customers in the past is when I go out to a customer and I look at their FMC and say, hey, you've made some changes here to the rules. How come those rules are enabled? You know what the answer is invariably? Tell me what it is. I don't know. Exactly. I heard I don't know right there, right? I don't know. I don't know why I did that. Somebody did that before me. They left 2 years ago, so I'm not sure why it's like that. But if you do know, it's still something you have to go in all the time. My point's always been, if you're going to go and modify the Talos rule set, then it behooves you also to go back from time to time and review what you've done to it. You have to go back and review it and say, is that change I made still valid? If it is, okay. If it's not, I better reverse it or whatever. That's a lot of work. And that's what you pay Talos to do. So I just love this feature. The new apps from the LSP will allow you to leverage those changes. Where'd that pig go? LSP? Anybody? LSP? What's an LSP? Who said it? Oh my gosh. Oh. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, lightweight security package. It's called Lightspeed is what the format they came up with. But yeah, so this replaces the SRU. What's SRU? SRU? Not the same guy. It's close enough. Who said it? It's security rule update, but I like Snort 2. All right, so yeah, in Snort 2, it's an SRU, a security rule update, Tuesdays and Thursdays. In Snort 3, it's an LSP. So again, no need to constantly tweak your rule set. Okay, so that's the really nice thing. And again, in your scenario would be something like, I use a lot of Chrome deployed across my environment, right? So my normal rule set is balanced, but I want Chrome to use a security rule set. You can do that now. Or I don't use any Internet Explorer. You can remove that group altogether, or maybe just minimize it down to the security level 1, and give you those knobs to turn without having to go back and keep maintaining that. So pretty cool. All right, recommended rules, formerly known as firepower recommendations. Now, what are they? It's a self-tuning rule set. This is nothing new. It's been around for decades. I mean, literally. So Snort rules are enabled or disabled based on host data in the network map. Right? The network map is gathered, collected by the FMC, built on the FMC from data collected from your devices. Passive traffic analysis. There's various, if you ever look at a host entry in your host database, you'll see there's a bunch of things in there, the operating system, the services on the host, applications, listening port, and vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities is what recommended rules works on. So Snort rules are written for vulnerabilities. Hosts have vulnerabilities. We can match those up and say, hey, if you have these vulnerabilities, you need these rules, right? Okay, so what are some changes from Snort 2? No rule overhead. So I don't know, no, there's just no rule overhead. We'll talk about that. No such thing as rule overhead in Snort 3. Again, the security level is based on Talos policies. So instead of overhead, we have security level, which we're all familiar with now, right? The recommended rule action is derived from the security level. So if a rule is set to drop in a particular security level you're using, that's what the recommendation will be. That's different than Snort 2. I put two ways to get there because in 7.1, so in 7.0 there were no recommendations. That went away for that version, so for Snort 3. For Snort 7.1, we brought it back, and then it's also here in 7.2, but it's different. The UI is a little different between 7.1 and 7.2, so I want to make sure you saw both versions. So this is 7.1 in the intrusion policy UI, and there's a button here on the left where your rule categories are here, where you can configure recommendations. In 7.2, we changed the UI a little bit, trying to show more of how the layers work here, right? So you have a base policy, we have group overrides, recommendations, your own rule overrides yourself. So that's where you customize those rule states. But it's a little different spot, and there's a button there that you would click to enable recommendations, configure those. So when you click that button, either place, you get this dialog. Again, we're security levels. This is why security levels are important. You're going to see them pop up all over the place. So we all know what those are now, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to pick the security level. You have the option to accept recommendations to disable rules, and then protected networks. We already know what security levels are, right? And those are the same thing. They map directly to the policies. Okay, so I want to compare, if you're familiar at all with Snort 2 recommendations, what that looks like in Snort 3. So in Snort 2, again, we have this overhead. So we have low, medium, high overhead. So overhead equals policy. And that's true in Snort 2 as well. So when I say that the medium overhead is the same as the balanced rule set, it really is. And it's the same here too. So all the years you thought overhead meant overhead just means rule set. So medium overhead means the balanced rule set. It's exactly the same. If you ever do a test on some policies, the recommendations for medium and the balanced policy, you'll see they're exactly the same. Okay, so let's compare those two together, what you'd see. So if you set the low overhead on Snort 2 recommendations, it's the same thing as picking security level 1 in Snort 3. Of course, we know medium is security level 2. Guess what? High is security level 3. So that's the security over connectivity rule set. Now, one thing you don't get in Snort 2 is you can't use the max detection rule set. There's no provision for that. But in Snort 3, you can. So should you? No. Okay, who said no first? I got a football. You don't want a football. I got to take those bags off. They fly better. Yeah, I don't recommend it, but you could. You could say, hey, make recommendations based on the max detect rule set because I want to live dangerously, right? Okay, next selection you get after that is to pick whether you want recommendations to automatically disable rules. So what this is going to do is it's going to actually go in and disable all your rules and then enable rules based on vulnerabilities. So it's a bit of a misnomer here. It's not going to just disable rules. It's going to disable all your rules and then just enable rules for vulnerabilities it finds in your network map. So exercise extreme caution anytime you check that disable checkbox. I generally don't recommend it. The only time I generally would ever really recommend it is if you have a device that is probably oversubscribed. You need to do something about the performance on it in a more intelligent way than just hacking away at rules. But just be careful with the disabling rules automatically on the device. It's very, very important that you have excellent host data, meaning you have eyes into the network all over the place in your devices and very good host data on your FMC. Because if you don't even think about using the disable option. The protected networks, leaving that blank considers the entire network map in the FMC. If you had a large network and maybe you had a section over here with some devices on it and you wanted to run recommendations just on this part of the network, you could conceivably put a CIDR block or two in there and limit recommendations to just what's seen on this part of the network. But complexity is the enemy of security, right? If you screw that up, you could impact your detection. So most people just leave that blank. I have time for a quick question.
Doesn't that include outside?
Does that include outside? No, this.
Yeah.
No, this would be, so the network ranges that would be in here are based on your network discovery policy. Right, so network discovery policy, you have rules in there for host discovery, and by default it's 000/0, but there's no host discovery turned on. So one of the first things you're going to do when you configure FMC is go ahead and edit that discovery policy and do host discovery only on your internal networks. So you're already only doing that. Doesn't have anything to do with the variables. A question about what, Snort variables?
Usually when you have this variable set in your updates, you have this one from home networks and external.
Right, home networks. Okay, sorry. The question was about the variable sets and whether you have home network in your variable sets, and is it derived from that? No, it's not. It could be. In fact, it's a good idea, right? That's up to you, though. It's whatever you put in your discovery policy is what determines whatever the scope is here. And this allows you just to narrow that down further. So by default, it's going to be all your internal hosts, which is probably the same as your home net, right? But yeah, it's not automatic here. And I think you put network objects in here, so you can use the same objects you use in the discovery policy. Okay, so after you configure your security level and all that happy stuff, then you click either generate or generate and apply. And once you do that, you get a little change. You notice the button up there went away, so I don't have, it doesn't say not in use anymore because it's in use. So, and then you get this little, there's some buttons down here, which you select the layer, you get the buttons, additional controls, that's what they look like. So you'll get some links for things like accept, refresh, edit, discard. So accept, you'll see that if you only picked generate, meaning I want to generate recommendations but don't want to actually use them yet. So if you've done that and you change your mind, say, okay, I'm ready to use them, then you can click accept. It'll put that layer into the policy to make it active. Otherwise, you're not going to see that if you pick generate and apply. Because if you pick generate and apply, you're already using it. So there's no reason to accept it. Refresh just runs those recommendations again, looking at your host database, looking at the vulnerabilities in the VDB. Okay, so the VDB, anybody know what the VDB is? What'd you say? Vulnerability database. There you go. Okay, heard it over there too. I got extra pigs. This is a super pig. Oops, sorry, I think I threw it too far. Oh, all right. Amaze myself sometimes. Okay. Edit will let you go back to that previous dialog and make some changes, to the security levels and such. And discard just removes it altogether. He said, nice experiment, changed my mind, don't want to use recommendations. Okay, why might you use recommendations? Okay, so we have some scenarios, and this is one area, even though they function pretty much the same, largely the same as I did in Snort 2, I think they're easier to understand in Snort 3. So we put some stuff in here in the UI especially, say, okay, what might you want to do? Increase protection. So I might want to expand my current rule set. So I like my current rule set. I don't want to go up to the next policy necessarily, but I want to expand it in some intelligent manner, right? Focus protection. So in this case, I like my rule set, but I think I got some fat there. So, and again, this is going to involve checking the disable checkbox. So make sure you have good discovery data if you're going to think about this. But if you have good discovery data, then you can say, well, I want to trim the fat, but I also want to consider more rules. So I want to remove some rules, but I'd add more at the same time. High efficiency. So this one here, performance is my key concern, need to reduce the enabled rule count. And again, this is probably because you have a device you should have bought a bigger device, right? Or something like that. It's not something you would normally want to do. I wouldn't say it's emergency, but it's a way to more intelligently trim your rule set when, I have to trim my rule set, I just don't have enough bandwidth, I don't have enough CPUs here to do what I need to do. Okay, so as you're picking these security levels that you base your recommendations on, that message is going to change, and this is where it's pretty cool. So you'll see messages like no impact. So let's say that you have a policy based on the balanced rule set, and you tell recommendations to use security level 2, which is the balanced rule set, right? So you're already using the balanced rule set. You told it, well, give me recommendations based on the balanced rule set. It's like, there's no impact. You're already using it. I can't recommend anything you don't already have. So unless you check disable, which is not the case here, if you see no impact, then do something else or don't use recommendations because it's not going to do anything. Higher efficiency. So again, this is where you're using the same policy, the same security level you already have, like sec level 2, but you've checked the disable checkbox. Higher efficiency. In this case, I'm using a bigger policy. So again, start at balanced maybe. I tell recommendations to use the security rule set, level 3. You're gonna get increased security, more rules. And then focus security. So in this case, I've checked the disabled checkbox, but I've also told it to consider a larger rule set, right? So I have balanced. I want to base recommendations on the security rule set, security level 3, but I also want to disable what I don't need. And lower security, I don't see anybody doing this ever. Should become a red X over this one in the UI, if you ask me. This is basically saying I have the balanced rule set, but I want to disable rules and make recommendations based on the connectivity rule set. Like, why would you do that? Just use the connectivity rule set. Seems silly, but that's what it will do. You'll end up with a much lower rule count. Now, note about those policy delta messages you just saw. That's assuming that you're using a Talos policy as your base policy, because most people are. But if you've looked at some of my previous talks here and decided, hey, I want to use a nice hierarchical policy and have hierarchical intrusion policies, your base policy might be a custom policy. If that's the case, these messages mean nothing, because we cannot tell you how it will affect your rule set based on a custom policy. We can only tell you based on one of the policies that we have. So I did some testing, because the big question is, well, how's it going to affect my rules, Alex? I don't know how it'll affect your rules, but I'll show you how it affected my rules. So back in April, I had a lab, and I want to run some of these recommendations and see what happens. So these were the base rule sets at that time. So they've probably changed a little bit now, but they're roughly the same. So security level 1, 556, 9300 for 2, 20,000, 37,000. So those are the base rule sets you'll see in the policies. Again, their mileage may vary a little bit now because they change a little bit over time, but that's what they were in April. So when you run recommendations, here's what I came up with. So there's the starting rule set at the top. Again, I started with balanced 9300 rules. If I picked higher efficiency by just checking the disabled checkbox, I ended up with 6,000 rules. And again, totally dependent on your network and the vulnerabilities and things that are found there. It's a fair number of hosts in this lab network, but it's not going to be exactly the same as yours. But I think it's more or less representative. So it did trim some of the rules. If I picked increased security, which means give me recommendations based on the security rule set, I got 17,000 rules. And if you remember, the security rule set before was 20,000 rules. So it didn't use the entire rule set, right? It recommended a few more rules out of the security rule set. Focus security, 13,000. So these numbers fall about where I would expect them to, right? That one falls somewhere below the security, but above, where you start out from. And in lower security, like I said, don't do it. It just totally destroyed the rule set, right? I mean, from 9,000 to 393, you probably didn't want to do that. Okay, so my last caveat always when I talk about recommendations is accurate host data is key, okay? You don't have to use recommendations. Recommendations is not something that, if you don't use that, you're crazy. No, it's not like that at all. So if you do want to use it, though, you have to have good host data. And what does that mean? It means you have to have, visibility to that traffic. So my last bullet on there, what that means basically is if your devices are just deployed as firewalls on the edge of your network, you can't use recommendations, because we cannot get enough information about the interior of your network with just looking at it from the edge. You have to be able to look at that traffic inside, right? So you need some devices deployed, seeing that east-west traffic. Otherwise, you just don't have enough data. So I'm happy to tell people do not use recommendations in some situations. And if all you have is an edge firewall or a number of those, do not use recommendations. You will not have good enough host data, okay? Let me caveat that a little bit. You can probably use recommendations to enable additional rules. Just never check the disable checkbox if you don't have good discovery data. If you have marginal discovery data, I suppose you could add additional rules. It won't be that great, but it'll work. It'll add more. But don't ever try to disable rules based on inaccurate or incomplete host data. Okay. The rules language. I got a bunch of snorts in here still. I don't have... Okay, I should have taken this out of the bag earlier. I don't have any more questions, so I just have to throw pigs wherever I can, sorry. And there'll be other door prizes at the end. All right.
If you apply
to generate and apply the recommendations. Maybe how long would you recommend?
Oh, good question. I forgot that. Thank you. So the question was, if I generate recommendations, how often should I refresh those? Excellent question. I forgot about that. So yeah, if you generate recommendations, you can do a scheduled task, which you should. There's a scheduled task you can turn on to run periodically that will refresh those recommendations. You definitely should do that. I do it about every 2 weeks because there's 3 things in recommendations that impact recommendations, right? There's the rule set, which changes a couple times a week at least. There's the vulnerability database, which lists the vulnerabilities. And there's your hosts on the network. So any of those things change, you should refresh your recommendations. And about every 2 weeks. So everyone should pretty much, if you're gonna use recommendations, you should create a scheduled job to do that regularly. And again, that's another thing I've seen. So you ran recommendations a year ago, great. When was the last time you ran them? You gotta run them. If you run them, you gotta keep running them. Okay, Snort 3, rules. So Snort 3 rules, easier to read, write, and verify. Now, they're not that much easier, but they're easier. So I'll show you what I mean. Consistent use of punctuation like comma and semicolon. So it uses service matching criteria, which is available in Snort 2 as well, and the metadata keyword, but there's actually a service keyword in Snort 3. Header nets and ports are optional, blah, blah, we'll see these. Okay, here's my first example, inconsistent syntax. So in Snort 2, so you can see I have a few keywords there. So the top keyword is a keyword, some parameters, comma separated. Second one, keyword, parameters, comma separated. Third one, the content check, keyword, well, the parameters are semicolons. They're actually other keywords, but those parameters, those impact the content check. So that's kind of inconsistent, right? Why are there semicolons there? In Snort 3, those 2 rules look the same, keywords, but the content check now has commas instead of semicolons, so it's more obvious those are parameters for the content check. And this is also one reason why these 2 languages are not compatible. Snort 2 would totally barf on that. I have no idea what to do with it. So you can't interchange those 2 rule languages. Traditional headers are still supported. We have the protocol, the source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port. That's great. You can still write your rule header like that, but you can also write it like this. Alert HTTP. Pretty cool. Now, you may want to put those IPs in there, but a lot of times you really don't need the IPs. I just need a rule for HTTP. Yeah, that's all. I can't talk more about that. Rule actions, okay? So let's talk about those. So pass is the same in Snort 3 as it was in Snort 2. Now, one of the things in the UI is you get to use all these rule actions in the UI in Snort 3. In Snort 2, you didn't. You had drop and generate or generate, that's it. Here, you can actually use all these rule actions in the UI on the FMC. Alert, generate the event. Block, drop the packet, block the remaining session. Block in Snort 3 is the same thing as drop in Snort 2. But there's a drop in Snort 3, because I like to confuse people. So there's a drop in Snort 3 also. That only drops the offending packet. Rewrite, that's a keyword that is, we had an action in Snort 2 for replace on the content check. We still have it in Snort 3, but you need the rewrite keyword if you're gonna use that. Reject and react, those are the same. You really don't use them much anyway. But let me reiterate for sure here. Block is what you wanna use in Snort 3. Do not set rules to drop in Snort 3 unless you're sure. In fact, if anyone can come up with a reason why there should be a drop keyword in Snort 3, let me know and put it in the room, or I'm serious. I have not come up with a use case for why I would only want to drop the offending packet, but let the session continue. I mean, if I see a badness in a packet, I'm gonna drop it and block the whole thing. So I just need a use case from somebody so I can explain why that might be there, but I haven't found one yet. Something else in Snort 3 is cool. You can put remarks in the middle of rules. That's kind of nice. You can use app IDs, keywords. So I wrote this rule. It basically alerts on all the Google stuff. Regex is another one for hyperscan-enabled PCRE. I put this in here because there's no sensitive data preprocessor in Snort 3, but you can still look for sensitive data patterns with this SD pattern keyword. So we didn't lose that functionality just because we don't have an advanced setting anymore for that. So, and some stuff for SCADA. Okay, That's it. I'm out of time. Now, these links are good. This top one, the YouTube channel for NetSec, recommend you folks go there. Every time there's a new release, we put a lot of videos out there. This is another new site, this Essentials Hub. It has best practice information, which is something people have been asking for hundreds of years. So, also, if anybody want to be beta testers, they asked me to throw this slide up there. Again, look in the PDF for the details. But they really want beta testers. So if you're willing to put in the time for the beta program, you can actually have a very high impact on the product by being a beta tester. So you know how the surveys work. Thank you very much. I'll be online. I still got a couple more pigs to get rid of. Hold on. Thank you, thank you. There we go. Front row. And over there. Oh, sorry. If you look on the front of your chair, if you have one of these, there's 4 of those out there. Just the front edge of your chair, you get a book, Essential Firepower. So it's 2 years old, but it's still okay. So if you find that sticker, just bring it up and I'll give you a book.